powered by Reviting, streaming from the Reviting Digital Studio. It's the David Daily. Exploring frontier technology, artificial intelligence, quantum innovation, and the intersection of faith, funding, and the future. Here's your host, David Goki.
Did you know that you can go live with the power of pressing just one button? It really is that simple, especially when you have a production team like Reviting, production partner that can help you go live, not just on LinkedIn, but on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, and of course, other platforms like Twitch, Kick, and TikTok. So I just want to encourage you to go live yourself as well if you've ever wanted to get in front of the camera, especially on live stream as you get to engage with the live audience.
I want to give a quick testimonial for the Reviting team and Jessie. I was really nervous about doing lives. And so thanks to Jessie and her team, I've now been doing them for, I think, 7 or 8 months now. The other thing is they very much have helped me increase my reach and online presence. So thank you, Reviting and Jessie.
Jessie, I love what you and the team do. You make it so easy for me to get in, have a meaningful conversation with some amazing guests, and then watch the post-production. But I've been picking up 50 followers a day just because that content is resonating so well. And I've had a number of people reach out to me who want to be guests on the show. So it's working across a lot of different channels for me. And I can't thank you enough.
I'm Sarah Hanks. I'm with the Northwest Industrial Resource Center. I'm the president and CEO. One of the problems that we struggle with is getting our brand out there. The work that we provide are small and mid-sized manufacturing companies. However, the number of manufacturers that know who we are is very small. What Jessie and her team have been able to do for us is to take advantage of LinkedIn and the idea of going live on LinkedIn and using that platform to its fullest extent through the way they're able to take the live event and break it down into bite-sized posts, which that can then be used to further take advantage of the platform and its capabilities. Your team shows up very organized. They're holding us accountable to the tasks that we need to complete so that they can do their work in a timely fashion. The content that's being created is very professional. They were able to take what was limited in terms of how our brand shows up, but actually turn that into visualizations for the different shows, the video clips that are being taken, as well as the content within the posts themselves.
Perfect. Welcome to the live show today, folks. I'm so grateful that we get to showcase some of the results from our customers. And if this is your first time tuning in, we've got a special guest today, Mr. Scott Chou. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm trying a Headset Advisor, which is a brand, a sponsorship. If you want to go live, you can go live as easy as 1, 2, 3 with a headset like this. So this segment of the show is called Funding, Faith, and Future. And today I'm going to bring Scott Chou to the stage. Scott, it's good to have you here.
Hey, David. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
What a pleasure to have you on the show. You started your own fund. You're there in Los Altos, California today. What's the weather like, actually?
It's perfect today. Actually, I'm looking out the window. It's blue skies. It's the San Francisco Bay Area weather. So I hope it's nice over where you are.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I have a grandmother in Indianapolis, and she's been going through a health transition, as grandmothers typically do. So I get some quality time with her this week, and I'm really excited about that. Well, we're going to jump into our first segment called Funding.
All right. What would you like to talk?
Time to talk about funding.
Okay, I'm excited because you're the co-founder of ESO Fund, Employee Stock Options, and as a Microsoft, ex-Microsoft, a big corporate tech, and a startup C-suite officer, we talk about employee stock options all the time. So how do VCs evaluate deal flow across some of those types of funds when evaluating how you're going to maximize returns for your fund, as well as this deep tech and biotech markets, which you have a specialty in?
All right, sure. So first of all, my firm mainly does enterprise software. Okay, but we do biotech, and we definitely do deep tech as well. And in general, I've been doing it for 30 years, by the way. I got into the venture capital business through the Kauffman Fellows program in the 1990s. So the framework that I learned and I've shared with the people I've hired over the years is basically the three M's, or quickly say M&Ms, and that is management, market, and the moat, or sometimes I say monopoly, but the moat goes a little quicker. And the management means the number one thing is you're looking at the people you're gonna back, and whether they have the domain expertise, the contacts, the sales, the connections in the business, and the passion to do whatever it is they want to do. And that's the biggest thing. That's going to be the single highest correlating factor. Number two is the market. Whether this is more of a business school evaluation where you're looking for a market that's right, ready to go. Whether you have to do a missionary sale, like you have to convince them that they want something, and you'll be the pioneer in that space. That could be a big deal too. Like, when Facebook was doing social media and people didn't know what social media was, that could be a pretty big deal if you're successful, creating a whole category for yourself. But typically you're going after something that already exists and you're saying you're making it cheaper, better, faster. So we're looking at that. And then, of course, the moat, that's the defensibility. What is it? Is it technology? Is it certain relationships? Is it early mover, like a network advantage that you create by getting going? But evaluating that framework, that's where it all starts. And then there's a whole bunch of bean counter stuff in terms of calculating the potential exit value, the rate of return, the hurdle, and coming up with a price that we could afford to pay for this stock. Is that sort of, am I going after the right
Yeah, no, that's
areas for you?
good. I was just thinking, I was so caught up on your first statement of 30 years. Wow, I was just a young kid. And here you are having 30 years, 3 decades of experience. They say you can maybe have 5 to 7 careers in your life. So you
Hmm.
really doubled down on this, and we would consider you an expert. So why don't we just start from the beginning? What are some of the initial things that a VC, GP, or LP would be looking for in their fund?
Well, like if you go back to the framework, management would be the first. And a lot of times, I hate to say it, but a lot of the business plans we get are actually from unemployed middle-aged executives. Okay,
Mm,
they're just really kind of looking for another job, and they're struggling to get reemployed. And they got a lot of those business plans. They're not without merit, but they don't have a great track record versus a complete disruption by somebody who's a lot younger, who doesn't want to spend their whole life breaking into something. They just want to take it over because they have some angle. They feel that the old guard is doing it the wrong way. They have a better way, and they're going to jump right to the front of the line. And they can work around the clock and do all those other things as well.
yeah.
And so that's been a little bit better for us. I mean, there's examples of everything, being successful. But I'd say that that passion, in order to, also, if you want to, would you rather be rich, would you rather be king? That's a old phrase. And being king is not a good reason to start a company. Just being the boss. I was the boss before I got laid off, and I want to be the boss of something again. The only way to do that is to start my own place. That's not a great reason. Making a lot of money, as crass as that may sound, it is a good reason, especially if you also want to change the world, probably even a better reason. So you can change the world and make a lot of money at the same time. That'd probably be the
Yeah.
best combo.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You're saying the things that when we clip those video segments and go back, it's like, yeah, I remember back in, the what we call this the roaring 20s with this, the beginning with the worldwide global, what it is, like just these little things. And like in the fifth year of that decade, these things happen. And then Scott said, right back then, like,
Oh
be a
yeah.
massive disruptor and don't be bummy middle-aged manager wanting to start your own thing just to say you're the boss. No, I totally appreciate that. So what is it about this young generation that's hungry and they want to be king or queen of the hill, or they want to be really wealthy?
Well, um, they have a blank sheet of paper when they try to solve their problem, and that comes out to be an advantage because sometimes if you've been in something too long, is you're sort of confined to following the rules of the existing industry. And if you want to disrupt something, you don't necessarily know all that, and you don't have all the ways to penetrate that. So you're kind of frustrated. So you want to bypass them. It's kind of like, you go back to the whole internet, and its original value proposition is that you have this global reach instantly, even though you don't have the budget. They'll have a multi-million marketing budget, but you could do something viral on the internet for low money, and do all these things to get a lot of people's attention for very little cash. So all the really great ideas kind of come from that frustration, or solving that problem. And I think that continues to be the case. Rather than starting another airline that has a twist or two, you sort of like come up with a whole new way of transportation, or something, an entire
Yeah.
new business model, and just going to go right around it and just blow it out of the water completely. That's
Yeah.
that's where the real excitement happens.
I love it. I
It's
love
kind
this idea of a blank slate. It reminds me of just when I was a kid. Maybe you're watching this and you were a kid too. Just one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I remember when I had nothing to think about and I had all of the ideas and I had no adult responsibilities, just had imagination and creativity. And that is a little bit of a lost art, right? Like we get, I think, so
of.
caught up in routine ways, especially as we get older. Hey, this is the way we always did it, or back in the good old days, this is how we did it. But if I'm thinking, all right, I want to be disruptive, I want leverage, I want scale. Yeah, maybe to your point, I just saying I want to be really massively wealthy and have a lot of money. Or, the kids these days, they want to be influencers and go viral and have that convert. So that's one reason I particularly love live streaming on LinkedIn. I think we're early. The distribution leverage we get is just incredible. And on top of that, I only have to have a conversation with you, have a thought leadership conversation. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about. And I'm
Yeah,
excited that.
you're actually a perfect example of sort of
Hmm,
rather than getting a job at NBC, and working your way up I don't know
right.
how long that chain is, and becoming their news anchor or whatever. You just get started. You build your own audience and just grow it and grow it and grow it, and you don't need anybody's permission. That whole aspiration is kind of the reason why there's so many people that are quickly successful, and they bypass the old guard completely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're totally right. I remember the first time we all went virtual. Now, this is at a tech company. You now have like senior VPs, executive VPs, direct messaging the individual contributors saying, hey, what help do you need? And how can I help you with that data? How can I help you with that strategy? And so you have this kind of like this crushing effect of the hierarchy, the old way.
Mhm.
And then in addition to that, you now have automation and technology that helps you remove the need of candidly unintelligent people. I don't want to use any other crass words, but yeah, just to say you can remove the fat at a faster scale. And then this requires people to actually upskill and get hungry again. And those people who are hungry will be those that succeed, right?
Yeah, that's a mixed blessing. What you're describing, especially AI automation and stuff like that, is definitely happening. It's going to happen. There's no way to put that, cat back in the box. But I'm quite concerned about it too. Like, if you think about it, like my cell phone that I carry around with me, it's an amazing device. It does so many things, and it could actually sustain me while I'm on extended travel. And if I had that like way back in the 1980s when I was starting my first job out of college and stuff like that, I would have been a superstar. I mean, the whole internet at my fingertips, and email and phone and entertainment and all that stuff, and the whole suite of software, it would have been amazing. But today I have it, and I'm not a superstar, not least not because of that, because everyone's got that too. It's simply table stakes just to play. So right now, AI is amazing as people discover it, a person at a time. They have this, aha moment in how they could supercharge their skill set, and I'm doing that right now. I started vibe coding, last year. Although I was very skeptical in the beginning that anything, especially Claude or something like that, could possibly write software that was usable, much less debug it. But now I'm totally sold, and I've redone my whole way of thinking. But so in this transition period, I'll have an advantage over the people who aren't doing it. But looking fast forward down the road a few years, I think it's going to be table stakes, and everyone's going to be doing it. There's no advantage. You have to do all this stuff just to stay afloat, which is not a
Right.
great end
Right.
game.
Right. It's kind of like compounding magic, right? So it's like, all right,
Mhm.
we all understand compounding. But compounding really takes effect when you started yesterday. But if you couldn't start yesterday, then do it today, right? And personal brand is a personal example and great example of that, right? The more you lean into who you are today, the more you can look back and say, oh yeah, look at how much I've learned over time. Similarly, with technology, just learning the basics of laptop, keyboard typing skills, phone utilization, and expertise on the latest technology, the combination of those, and now even as we look to smart television and tablets, taking up actually more of a market share because what your family may have 5 tablets for all the family members, maybe a couple phones, and maybe just 1 or 2 laptops. So yeah, it's very interesting to see how technology is moving forward. But to get us back on topic, I want to really dive into your experience as a deal fund manager and evaluator. So you're looking at deals coming across your desk, you're evaluating, like, is this an AI technology that we're going to get into? I heard you say
Yeah.
management and team. I also would like to hear a little bit more about the 3 M's that you wrote about in your book, the first one being maxims. What are the maxims you
Okay.
want to consider in deal flow across AI?
Okay. I think, like an AI specifically, when you start to look at the product, which I think is where a lot of people tend to look at it first because they don't even know who the management are, who they are. So we look at the ROI value proposition when you try to sell a product. So at a minimum, you're typically saving money by reducing labor needs. You're doing something faster, but we're also looking for something extra. In other words, because regular enterprise software also makes you faster and it could reduce costs and stuff like that. But AI gives you the ability to displace human judgment. So if there's an opportunity there to create a really high value activity, that's an extra boost to your value proposition. And that also increases your switching costs. So, for example, like if you use AI to displace a whole bunch of your customer service costs, by taking away a whole bunch of people who are online, answering the phone or doing chatbots, and use AI to do that, that's great. So you save a bunch of labor, but it's uh, it's easy to replace by other people doing it or other things that are similar. But if you're doing something more advanced, let's say, for example, you have AI that trades for you, like buying and selling stock, and that judgment can make an extraordinary nonlinear amount of ROI for the amount of activity. That's something truly special. Now you make a lot more, and plus it makes your product a lot stickier because when you throw in judgment, it's harder to compare one product to another. So you won't get displaced overnight simply because something else works and it's cheaper because it takes a certain amount of time for you to get comfortable with the judgment of an alternative product and to assess over the long term whether it truly is smarter. And yeah, that's basically it. And the other elements for AI evaluation is we're looking for proprietary databases for data for training. In other words, are you just a thin wrapper on an existing public model, and you just all you know is whatever Claude knows or ChatGPT knows. But if you can feed your own proprietary data into a model so that you could be established vertical domain expertise, especially if it's a domain that's constantly changing, constantly evolving, where people recognize that and they need you to stay on top of it. Like, for example, if you do cybersecurity and you're constantly learning about the latest threats and you have a lab that's analyzing the latest threats and putting solutions together for them, you could feed this into a system and then people will pay to basically subscribe to that software continuously because they always want the latest and greatest abilities to defend against security threats. So
Yeah,
versus something that just does something once,
right.
even though no matter how advanced it is, eventually somebody will code their own, or even if they want to
Exactly.
vibe, they could vibe code one for nothing, and you could be displaced just like that. So to the
Yeah.
extent that you have more of a moat that helps. The other element of a moat would be like the network effect. I think I mentioned that. So that's a big deal. That's a very powerful moat because, like, for example, eBay. you know, it's not so much that software. I think anybody can probably vibe code equivalent of a web-based marketplace to buy and sell stuff. But eBay has all of those customers going there, and they have all those vendors, all tied into it. So it's got critical mass. So if you want to sell something, going to eBay is usually more effective than some other random site that has no traffic. So that network effect is pretty valuable. From AI, like one of our favorite companies, it's not really an AI company, but they spin AI pretty heavily. That's called Flock Safety, and they use AI to monitor license. They have license plate readers all over the country. Every time a car passes one, it gets logged. The make, model of the car, the direction it's going, the GPS location, and that allows law enforcement to basically go to Flock Safety, almost like it was Google, and to say something like, "Who did this?" Okay, and it will quickly calculate all the vehicles that were in position to go to those places. So, like, if you have two crimes that committed within an hour of each other, and they're here and here, you type it in, it'll instantly give you the list of cars that were actually in both of those places who had opportunity to do that. So it's a pretty big deal. It's been in the news lately
Wow.
for negative things. Like, they over the Super Bowl, they had this thing where they were going to team together with the
Hmm.
Ring cameras, the neighborhood cameras,
Mm.
and that resulted in a huge backlash. They had to back out of that.
Right.
That would have really upped their game in terms of visibility, their ability
Right.
to detect crimes. But I understand the consumers just didn't want that Big Brother effect to
Yeah.
that degree. So, but anyway,
Of
the
course.
point is, Flock Safety has a network effect. Other people could do
Right.
license plate readers, and
Right.
other people have, but Flock Safety has so many cameras out there. So if you're like a police department at a city that doesn't have it, and you're thinking about wiring up, you most likely will choose Flock Safety, because when you install it, you also participate in the wider network. In other words, when you're looking for the bad guy, they aren't necessarily inside your city right at this moment. They could be in somebody else's city. But the point is, when you do a search, it figures it out based on the patterns. The bigger the reach,
Yeah, I love
the
that.
more
And that's
likely
a
you're.
perfect example of proprietary data that you were talking about, especially when you're bringing your own version of that. I really also like what you mentioned earlier, which was really a special quote. I actually wrote it down. It said, the nonlinear relationship with ROI is truly special. And you said it in such a way that we're going to have to go back and clip that, because as a data scientist, it's like, oh, yeah, when you can see that linear projection and you just really see it taking off, it's like, oh, wow, this is so cool. In addition to that, on the data side, so you're talking a little bit about deep tech, right? So when you're evaluating a deep tech idea, often we ask questions about, is this actually a data solution that will violate any privacy or violate any security concerns? As you're thinking about that in funding, how do you bring that cybersecurity aspect to the table, which is now table stakes, especially with quantum, right behind or right around the corner, I would say. So how do you evaluate the security and cybersecurity infrastructure for a deal that's particularly an AI, has these network effects, a lot of people using it, and have, you're creating proprietary data that is really highly valuable, maybe not even widely accessible yet because of its nature of proprietary.
Okay, so you bring up a good question. So, and I admit that when we assess whether to invest or not, something like that would be like a second order operational thing. In other words, when we go to board meetings, we'll be pressing the management team to get on top of it, but that won't be the main reason why we get into a deal. Is in other words, their lack of preparedness for quantum threats. So the basic story there, as I understand it, is that copies of your data, even though encrypted, might already be floating around there, on old hard drives or whatever. And even though they're highly encrypted and no one can break into it now, they might break into it later when they have a quantum computer that actually works. Okay, so
Right.
so rather than
Yeah.
letting that happen, going and upping your security scheme right now
Right.
to deal with that. And I don't think there's a
Well,
lot of
harvest now,
people.
decrypt later, right?
Uh, yeah, right. I'd say most companies are probably not prepared for that. It's hard enough just to
Right.
stay on top of. I'd say most of the activity in security right now is simply interpreting all the alarms. Like, if you were
Right.
managing a network, you have all these little dings like, this hard drive is going low, this computer is running hot, this CPU has more activity than it does on average. But
Right.
how do you interpret that? You got millions of these
Right.
alarms. So those are a perfect machine learning problem, and that's sort of like
Exactly.
applying the AI. In other words, based on prior threats, after they happen, you
Right.
mark it. Okay, that was a threat. Okay, that
That
becomes
was an
training
anomaly
data.
detection. You label that anomaly as being a real threat, like a true positive. It wasn't, a false positive, for
That's
example. Not
right.
to get too data sciencey, but saying, yeah, this threat that we saw was a spike, and our deep tech AI model can actually evaluate that. Now, when you talk about cybersecurity and quantum, it's this idea that two-factor authentication with your 6-digit code or your authenticator app gets cracked with a supercomputer. So if you say readiness for AI and readiness for quantum, post-quantum cyber security or cryptography, right? PQC. How do you evaluate the PQC for a VC sponsored deal that you can really go back to your investors, your shareholders, and your partners and say, look, we have a really solid business here, and we feel like this is going to be, part of the future that's going to hit that scaled network effect.
Okay. So I lost the thread. I was still thinking about the two-factor. The
Yeah.
I think the quantum is probably not a threat to the login entry because it is two-factor, and they don't, even though they could replicate RSA, they don't know the seed. But I guess if they had the seed, they could anticipate what RSA code you might be being sent on your cell phone. Decrypting the password, I get that. So in other words, they grab a files and some break in, and they could decrypt your password later. And then of course the other piece of it would be figuring out the two-factor. So anyway, I was all hung up on that, whether that would actually work or
No,
not.
that's
And
good. No, I
but
love it.
the
I
but
like
the
that perspective to
so
be thinking about the
so I
tech. We
lost.
can be talking about that all day.
But so anyway, then you asked a real question, so I lost
Yeah.
that. Could you mind repeating that?
Yeah, the question was more so like, okay, so the purpose of this show, right, is primarily helping angel investors who've already invested 500K of their personal money, or a VC firm who's scaling to millions and billions and, eventually trillions, right? So putting that hat on, how do you evaluate the post-quantum cryptography readiness, or the PQC readiness of a potential AI deal?
Oh, okay. All right. I don't have that framework to be quite
Okay,
honest. And like I said,
let's build that. That's
that's
going to
a
be a great
company.
framework that we'll need, right?
That's a We could put that in the checklist for like a company readiness. Like the board could press
Right.
the management team to do stuff like that when there's a bona fide threat there. Like if a
Right.
quantum penetration will sink your business just like that, you know, that's a huge problem. So
Yeah.
the mitigation could be multifold. They could be in terms of everything from simply having backups to
Right.
to obfuscating the data further. Depending on what the damage is once somebody knows something,
Right.
or to make it just ridiculously difficult. Equivalent of a three-factor situation or something. Um,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
you
Anyway,
must
like
drop a blood sample
that's
in here, or take a swab of your inside cheek and get some DNA, or something that's
yeah.
more secure. But yeah, in terms of the checklist, I would just caution folks who are listening that I'm not certainly not a post-quantum cryptography expert, but acts of gods do happen, or acts of God do happen, and you want to be ready for that. I don't know if there's
Right.
post-quantum cryptography insurance
Well,
today, but that would be an
most of
interesting
the
market.
most of the break-ins are happening all the time right now in
Oh
terms of
yeah,
what.
absolutely.
Yeah, my primary concern would not be quantum. First of all, I don't think there's one that's got enough qubits to actually do a good job yet.
Right.
And even the qubits they have, the more they have, the probability that one's flaking out at any given time is higher. The longer, and they
Yeah.
need thousands of these, working perfectly in order to
Right.
solve the problem. So day to
Right.
day, it's simply the employees. The employees are the weak link. I
Right.
mean, for phishing attacks and
Hmm.
carelessness. So passwords are being lost all the time, and people are
Yeah.
being fooled into doing that. So that's priority number one, is just getting on
Right.
top of that. The quantum thing, uh, I'm concerned about it, but it hasn't made the big list yet for me yet. Maybe it should, but it hasn't. And partly
Yeah.
because as I meet the entrepreneurs, they don't have machines that work. Now what I don't
Right.
know about is state actors, whether they have deep
Mm.
labs, including the United States, whether they have really
Hmm.
good ones that are getting
Right.
closer to working. That
Hmm.
could be the case. We just don't know about it. You know,
Yeah, especially when if you were to say all of the data in the world today is a set number, in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's going to be literally pebbles on the seashore, right? So let's get
right.
into biotech markets. You mentioned biotech markets. Tell us how you evaluate biotech as a market.
Okay. So I admit that we have a lot less of that, but we do have maybe 20, 25, deals over the last 14 years in this that particular area. So we have some, and a lot of them are barely biotech. Like for example, back in the day, we did 23andMe, and that's more like although there's clearly a biotech angle to that company, but it really is a computer software company. In terms of its data and the way it extracts value and the way it connects long lost relatives and things like that. So, but there are pure plays as well. So it boils down to efficacy, all right? And since my team is, in terms of educational background, and myself, computer science degrees, we're biased to software. We're less able to evaluate. So we depend on the market making a clear indication that it kind of works. Okay, it doesn't not necessarily all the way through FDA, but there's usually some evidence that things are on the right track. Now, if they are on the right track, then we're looking for business model things like ways to properly monetize. Is it going to be, delivered as a pill? Is it treatment? Is there a code, or is this a medical device? Is it going to pass, the 510K? All those issues, kind of a checklist of things. It's not nearly as sophisticated as I'd say a pure biotech fund that only does this day and night. They do 30, 40 deals per fund, one fund after another, and they may have a more visionary approach in terms of a problem that is emerging that's going to that's that's going to happen. We're right now we still think that there's a lot of plays left in terms of all these orphan drugs that can be solved one at a time. Basically, ever since they mapped the genome, decades ago, that that targeted, pharmaceuticals are continue to be a great opportunity, especially orphan drug. You don't necessarily have all these competitors, and you can get FDA approval with a very limited trial of 50 to 100 patients, and you can get right through and be acquired, on pretty capital efficient, ideas, and as well as the platforms to do that. I think right now that's the most popular thing is using machine learning techniques to search out candidates, pharma candidates, and then developing them, letting the big boys take over once they get them to a certain stage. Am I going down the right path on that?
Focusing on faith for a moment.
Welcome to the David Daily. We're here with Scott Chou. Yes, you're going down the right path, Scott. This is so fantastic. And biotech leads us to a lot of considerations, especially around responsibility. So when we talk about our topic number 2, if you're just tuning in for the first time, we've got Scott here with us. I'm excited to have Scott here and to be sitting with him talking about decision-making, convictions, and responsibility in tech investing. And so you have to think a lot about those morality and ethics-based questions, especially in biotech. So how do you do that, especially when you tap into your own deep convictions?
Okay, so a lot of those are kind of addressed for us. Ethics. I think a good example of an ethical dilemma. I mean, in AI, I mean, they have classic easy ethical dilemmas. Like if you do a self-driving car, do you run over the jogger or do you run over the lady in the wheelchair if they're like right in front of you and you got no choice, stuff like that. But for I guess in CRISPR on the biotech side, you have the whole the potential for creating the perfect, selecting the perfect kid, or creating you know, the a superior race of people or something like that. The world's already spoken out, so we kind of we're company people here, so we go with that. In terms of if there's a micro issue that they face, I'm trying to think of
Mhm.
ever had a board meeting where there was something like that, right on the table. I mean, we had a tiny one. I remember there's a this device that we were working on that sees the blood veins, so where where you put the needle in. In other words, if you had darker skin, I think poses some challenges to placement. There are some minor issues. Can't think of a big one that hung us up for a while. What forced us to maybe pivot the product or anything like that.
Yeah, I
So
love
anyway, I'm sorry.
those questions about ethics. Yeah, especially when you're talking about, okay, this product meets a certain racial or ethnic or bio specific aspect. And it's like, okay, so we can launch this to the market, but there's this other population, maybe it's underrepresented, or maybe they would actually potentially suffer from this. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations. I think you actually brought up the common dilemma, which is this dilemma of the train wreck dilemma or the trolley problem, right? It's very common to be talking about that. It's like, do you, which of the two evils do you go after if there's only evil options? But yeah, it's interesting. There's even harder versions, which is the push dilemma, the loop dilemma, and the fat man version, which are philosophical terms, right? But without getting into all of that, I really appreciate what you said as, these discussions are coming up on boards of director meetings, right? These convictions and responsibility now more than ever need to be publicized, documented, and known so that people who utilize technology and also understand where their investments are going can feel safe and secure. And so tell me how you surround yourself with other executives, VC people, and partners in your business who have similar convictions as yourself, Scott.
Well, believe it or not, I actually recommend having a diversified way of thinking. Uh, I want people who are grounded, okay, but I think there's some benefits to having a little bit of diversification. Not like necessarily
Yeah.
DEI that type of diversification, but just sort of like a multiple
Yeah,
points of
diverse
view
opinions and perspectives. Yeah, absolutely.
to catch things. Like for example, like going back to the flock safety's issue with the ring camera integration.
Right.
I don't know how much money they spent. That was clearly a big thing, and the Super Bowl ads cost a fortune too. So they went a long
Right.
ways before having done any focus group analysis
Right.
to unravel it. So that's kind of
Right.
unfortunate. Um, but
These mistakes
there's
have real costs, right? Especially when you don't include the voice of the customer or ethics considerations that's solely ethics and morals focused, not just tech and profit. So you bring up a good example of how the ring incident with Flock had a real
Mhm.
material bottom line negative.
Yeah, I think also from the perspective an investor that still
Right.
hopes the company does well. I'm thinking that they could have massaged the wording. I admit that my first inclination isn't to back out of it completely because it's a bad idea. I'm thinking that the idea has merit, and it
Right.
maybe should have positioned in a different way so it didn't creep people out. So
Right.
anyway, not going to try to solve it now, but
Yeah, no, that's good. I agree and appreciate that. There's this balance, and we talked about it at Microsoft for a long time when we were looking at all Microsoft data. It's like, okay, we know exactly what you're searching for. We know we can help you right now, but if we don't wait a little bit, give you like, it's like that art of the dance, right? If you go in too strong, you're gonna step on someone's foot. If you back away too far, your partner's gonna fall. So it's like that graceful art of, okay, we know that you kind of need some help, but you're also human,
mhm,
so we want to bring that human experience to it. And it's like, yeah, even in the LLMs and chatbot space, it's like, yeah, when the AI slows down a little bit, in Spanish we call that despacio, and that slowness and human-like behavior actually gives me time to think, and that makes me feel safe. So I also agree that having an AI and Faith is an organization I volunteer with and contribute to. We have over 200 experts globally in all of the
mhm,
major faiths and religions. I really like what Brad Smith said, the head of legal over at Microsoft and now the president. He said that we invite all of the religions of the world to have these conversations. And to your point, it's not that your opinion is wrong. We actually want your opinion. If you have no opinion, that's almost worse than having a wrong opinion of whatever wrong would mean.
mhm.
But yeah, having those conversations is the first step. But to your point about safety earlier, it's, you need a physical safety at the actual data center or the hardware itself. You need safety embedded into the security of the software layer, including the cloud. But you also need that in-person human security, like access to the building, access to the individual's device, and things like that. I'm not sure if you. I'll give you an
Well,
example.
you're
You may remember. Sorry, I'll give the example after. But anyways, those 3 levels of security can help you
yeah,
in
no,
terms of security.
you're bringing up an investment opportunity, which is out there. I mean, in the broader category we refer to as the verification. And that includes sort of compliance issues and stepping
Right.
on people's feed issues. But
Right.
the broad problem is so AI is going to produce all this output. In order for that output to be safe, a human should be in the loop somewhere to check it. But now it's producing so much output that you can't actually double check. Well, we're close. We're not there yet. I'd say that we're not too far. At least in certain applications where the output will be overwhelming. All right, so there's no
Right.
practical way to check it all. Therefore, you need other software to sort of help you check at
Right.
scale. To
Right.
to
Classic
to look
consulting.
to
I
look
have a
through
problem. I
there.
have more problems, and I need more software and more problems. Right.
Yeah, especially like hallucinations. That's a
Right.
problem right now, and that's a really subtle
Absolutely.
thing because the machine doesn't necessarily know that it's hallucinating, but there are
Right.
tricks for the people who built these models to look for the signs that a hallucination potentially happened. All right,
Right.
and you could check that at scale. And your issue about
Right.
the faith, I mean, AI does give us the ability to tailor experiences,
Hmm.
on the fly there, so that
Right.
having another thing, so that even though two people talking to ChatGPT asking the exact same question, could
Right.
get two different responses based on where they live in the world and what faith they
Right.
have, and it could be nudged a little bit in one direction or another.
Right.
So all those type of things are investment opportunities, for problems that will arise as a result of all this
Yeah,
innovation.
I love that. I love that mindset you have about investment opportunities, especially around responsibility in tech. So we could talk about this for a long time, Scott. I'm having personally a lot of fun with these conversations. We have a third
Sure.
category and topic that we want to talk about, which is future tech. I'm going to play that video now.
Let's talk about quantum and the future of technology.
All right, AI and quantum. What does that mean to you? Let's start there.
Well, the quantum piece, uh, it's still solving those really big problems using that whole technique. The one thing that bugs me is like media people sometimes have unrealistic expectations of what quantum. They think that quantum just means like really fast or really capable, but it's not really. It's limited to a scope of problems. Like for example, like if you're solving Sudoku problems, okay, a classic computer just loops through the possibilities
Right.
and it solves the Sudoku puzzle, whereas the quantum computer says, "I know what a correct answer looks like." In other words, there's nines and all these rows and columns and boxes, and that's the correct answer. So therefore, if it starts here, you just kind of bleep, and all those, the numbers that fit all those, the conditions. So it sets up the conditions for the right answer so that nothing but the right answer could pop into it. And that's great because you skip all that looping that a traditional classic computer would do. But you have to remap a lot of problems. So it's not like you could take a whole bunch of
Right.
software that I have now and suddenly put it into a quantum computer and it'll just run a zillion times faster. It's not like that. It's
Right.
really to do something really specific. And the most feared thing is cracking the RSA security.
Right.
Even it's a lot of bits, so what the right answer
Yeah.
looks like. What a factor prime looks like, and you can set up those conditions. And,
Hmm.
and but if you look at that, I can't remember the name of that scientist that came up with the algorithm. So the algorithm for cracking RSA is well published.
Yeah, it's
It's
done.
just that you just don't have a computer enough
It's going
qubits
to take
to
like 10 million
to
years.
actually to actually do it. Okay,
Right.
that's one of the reasons why that's definitely not on my short list of things to worry about. But
Yeah.
it's kind of out there. So that's my take on quantum
Yeah.
is that I'm not investing a lot there, although you have a little bit of money placed in it. Is because the business problems are kind of few. I mean, cracking RSA is not really a business problem. That's a value proposition
Right.
for security
Right.
agencies and stuff like that.
Right.
Limited scope, and then even if you crack it and it becomes known that you crack it, they will come up with some other dynamic,
Right.
moving target encryption, that uh, the basic, basically it's cat and mouse,
Yeah.
and then you have to solve that all over again. So I don't
Right.
like that. But so in terms of solving sustainable problems, I uh, haven't really heard of a good repeatable problem. A lot of them are
Right.
addressable, like for some airline reservation optimization things. They're a lot addressable by just normal classic techniques. So
Right.
the it's not worth going through that much trouble. All right.
Right.
Um, and then you throw AI into it. So but that still kind of tells me that on the bad guy side, in other words, if you have an agent armed with a quantum computer at its disposal, you could work on passwords like one at a time,
Hmm.
following some
Right.
algorithm for you know and then break something open, then check it out. You could do this at scale. You could have a lot of agents.
Right.
And that wouldn't be great. So I'm getting into that myself. I'm
Okay.
not. We just installed OpenClaw, in the recent
Nice.
weeks, and we're getting used to it. And I can see a lot of things we're going to do with it. Mostly
Yeah.
financial trading, automated financial trading.
Yeah.
But we're kind of teaching it right now to get it going, and
Yeah.
we've got it sandboxed, or there are other use cases that we're not using it for because we have Microsoft Copilot. It's already sort of embedded into our data,
Yeah.
and presumably it's trustworthy because it's a
Right.
Microsoft product, because of all that, you know, corporate and long discipline, all those things that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we allow Copilot to help us prioritize emails, even delete emails, and this and that, because there's and access all of our files, our OneDrive files and SharePoint
Yeah.
files, and then answer questions for us. Okay,
Right.
but the OpenClaw stuff, we're not there yet. So they're on
Yeah.
sequestered computers,
Right.
uh, not on our well, they are on our same physical network, but they're not on the Office 365 Enterprise. They're not
Right.
authenticated machines in that
They're
regard.
they're ring fence. There was a question that came up earlier. How do you ring
Yeah.
fence, right? And create separation there, boundaries essentially, and just
Mhm.
like guidelines, right? Like you would with the child, right? You want this, you want to raise your little open claw bot, lobster, whatever you want to call it. You want to have your little claw bots all behaving inside the rule
Uh,
sets that you've
yeah,
created for it. And if you just give it
exactly.
open access, it's just going to be like a kid. It's going to go click on every little file, look at every little thing, like start to go run your credit card on random training so it can learn too. I mean, it's just very interesting what some of these Claude bots have done. I'm on all those threads, and just, yeah, that's the future of
Uh,
technology. Is instead of needing a team of 20,000 people, I need a team of like 200, and I'm actually faster and more efficient with just one human. So I think what happens then is now every human now gets access to that level of efficiency at scale, right? And it becomes very easy, and we start to focus on a much larger human problems, such as, how do we get every single person in the world to have clean water, or we start to think on larger problems. Now, when it comes to quantum, though, just to bring us back to our topic today, as we come kind of to a conclusion of the show here shortly, in 10 years from now, what does quantum experience look like? Either you could go the state defense R&D route, which 20 years out will maybe be halfway there. You could go the maybe commercial application route, or maybe even consumer readiness to adopt, micro instances of quantum efficiency. And people are talking about like modular nuclear as well. Will we be there in 10 years? I don't know, but you definitely need lots of energy for quantum. So maybe
mhm.
10, 20 years out, putting your kind of your R&D investor VC hat on, where are the bets you think that are really going to take off? And this is all
Okay.
conjecture, so I just want to hear
All
your
right.
perspective on it.
Okay. At the risk of being slain by a bunch of entrepreneurs, I'm a little bit skeptical because it's been out there for a couple of decades already, and I don't see a long list of low-hanging fruit in terms of problems that repeatable problems to solve. But there's going to be I'm confident there will be a good one. It'll be a contrived problem. It'll be maybe something that arises from the AI workflows that that are coming about now. and then we create an artificial problem that has to be calculated quickly, often, all right, and by a lot of different people based on
Right.
their own unique. So when that occurs, then we have a business. Okay, that's
Right.
right now. I'm thinking a lot of the optimization problems that I need to solve, that most companies need to solve, or actually aren't that big. My own firm, we're doing calculations all the time, but we're talking about portfolios of thousands of companies and tens of thousands of clients and hundreds of thousands of targets. Those are not big data problems. They seem like decent sized numbers, but they're really small. Regular computers doing things the regular way are quite capable of staying on top of them. So we don't need anything quantum yet. But there are bigger companies with bigger problems and stuff like that. So, out there somewhere, I'm sure there's some good ones, that they
Yeah.
could just slay over and over again. It's got to be also
Yeah.
repeatable, as opposed to
Right.
a crack once situation. It's something
Right.
that comes up every single day. You got to crack it again
Right.
and again and again.
Yeah. It could be something like, for example, if we just took the topics you talked about today, bringing this all together, your orphan drug, pharmaceuticals, and biotech somehow align with CRISPR, and now you have a biotech problem that is unique and individual for each human genome and individual human, which could be deployed very quickly through some quantum technology that would save human lives at scale. That seems kind of interesting, maybe 20, 30 years out. If you had some rogue agents that were, giving everyone pancreatitis or something silly and just dumb like that. But yeah, it's really interesting. Like, we're gonna switch to our rapid fire portion of the show. So real quick, rapid fire set of questions, just kind of first thing that comes to your mind. If
Okay.
you're ready,
All right. Go ahead.
you ready? Okay,
Yeah.
ready, set. First job you ever had?
First, what?
First job.
Oh, I was a car hop at Sonic Drive-In in high school.
Nice.
So,
Venture capital or entrepreneurship?
what I do venture capital, and but I always dream of being an entrepreneur. I mean, to this very day, I still think about ideas that I could run with if I had the bandwidth. The fact that these agents,
Nice.
that's my secret fantasy is I get one of these trained well enough
Right.
to go with it. And it was be
Right.
obviously they could do the engineering department, they could do the marketing department, and they could do
Right.
sales. And then we throw in accounting and legal and stuff like that. Basically, just a
Nice.
collection of bots, and I show up to the bank and deposit, withdraw the money. That's my
Yeah.
fantasy. Let's see if I
Nice.
can actually accomplish that.
I love it. I'll take a word from your own mouth. Don't be a middle manager business plan in my pitch deck from someone who wants to be their own boss. I thought that was just so funny. All right. Biggest lesson from Caltech?
Wow, that's good. It's going way back. You know, uh, well,
Rapid fire.
like
First thing
pass
that comes to
fail,
your mind.
pass. I think in pass fail, pass is pretty good. In other words,
Okay. Yeah. Pass is
sometimes you
pretty
just
good. C's
just
get,
just
C's get
just
degrees.
just be in the game. Well, they actually
Yeah.
when we got there, they actually graded pass fail, and I was very
Right.
thankful for that. It just kind
So
of
favorite startup
gets you warmed up.
sector right now? Favorite startup sector?
It's AI. It's AI. There's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then most underrated founder trait?
Uh, it's the underrated. I actually think I was about to come up with is just want to change the world thing, but it's not underrated. It's
Right.
actually re- respected.
Mm,
The I think the maybe the age I give credit for less age. I mean, the general thought is that wisdom is more valuable. The more experience, more wisdom you have, uh, the better. But
right.
I actually kind of after point, I hold it against you. I think it's sort of like you're
Right.
too ingrained. So I give credit for being younger.
Nice. I
So
like
maybe
that.
maybe,
Most
maybe,
youth is the most underrated founder trait. I like it. So any
okay.
kids watching this, get started sooner. Best book on venture capital?
Mine. That's the
I
the
love it.
maximum morals and metaphors.
I
It's a
love
quick
it.
read, and that's
Worst startup
basically.
advice
Yeah.
you'd ever heard? What's the worst advice you've ever heard as from a startup?
Oh, I think that one I complain about often is that would I rather have an A management and a B technology, or a B
Yeah,
technology?
right.
Well, actually, that whoever said that, it just sounds clever, but it's not even. it's not
I
even
want an
true,
A
actually.
product and an A team. Just why can't I have both?
Yeah, that's the answer.
Exactly.
You want them both, and actually, if you can't have them both, you still might be better off with the A product. Because you could solve management issues and you could
Right.
just, but if you don't have the tech, you're really
Right.
stuck. Yeah,
Right. It's like I
yeah.
want to have an A plus team building an A plus product that scales and has all these things. So, all right, that
Right.
was a great rapid fire segment. Love that. You answered very well. Okay, we are going to transition into our favorite segment, which is an anchor segment, Beyond the Bag. Play the intro.
Beyond the bag, beyond the bag, beyond the bag.
All right, nice. So Scott has prepared something that he cannot travel without. It's a total surprise to both of us watching and myself and everyone behind the stage. So what is in your bag? Scott, we're curious, what do you travel with? You can't leave the house without this
Okay.
item.
I tr- Well, okay, so my favorite thing is actually the drone. I carry a small DJI drone, a 5 Pro, and that allows me to take photography from angles that are impossible to reach by phone. But in terms of the one but there's lots of situations where you can't take a drone at all. So this type of camera seems very obsolete, because people are now on their iPhones. But there's one thing that this does that the iPhone can't do, which is the massive zoom. Okay, this comes out, like 720 millimeters, which is the equivalent of a huge, a zoom lens. So you can take this into basketball arenas and football stadiums and basically, get the facial expression off players on the court or in the field. And you can't do that
Nice.
with the iPhone. So it's small.
Nice.
If they allow that
I
in the
love it.
clear plastic bags that go into stadiums. So this is my little
Nice.
thing. I still own these things. I
I
think
love it.
they're very useful. Yeah.
Yeah, the OG Canon camera. Yeah, exactly. The comments are lighting up saying the OG camera came out. All right. For me, it is this cool little mouse. It's a WeeWoo mouse. I actually got this from a tech fair in Colombia, in Medellin, Colombia. And I've never seen a mouse like this. It lights up. It's really awesome. It has I can connect this to 3 machines simultaneously, one with a USB, and then 2 Bluetooth signals, one Bluetooth 1 and one Bluetooth 2. It's very lightweight and it looks pretty sweet. I don't travel without this. I can connect it to any computer, including gaming computers, because it does have a DP switch. But I really like
Okay.
yours. So unique. We have never seen that on the show. All right, as we come to a conclusion, Scott, what is the best way for people to reach out to you, and who specifically do you serve, and how do you help those people that you serve?
Okay, so my business, the ESO fund, we have traditional venture capital, but the biggest amount of money in our management we have is called the Employee Stock Option Fund, and basically we help people who can't afford to exercise their stock options to rather than letting them expire worthless, we'll take the investment for them. That means we absorb all the risk, and they get unlimited upside without having to take on that financial burden. A lot of people don't understand that they got stock options when they started, and it's a great package. They thought in their head, maybe I could afford that at the time. If push comes to shove, I get laid off, I could write a check for 30,000. But what they don't realize, and this is what I recommend they do, is to study the tax implications. Because if you've been working there 5 or 6 years, the cost of exercising is not just the 30,000, but it's also the $400,000 of tax that come with an exercise just for doing it. And that catches people completely off guard. And that's pretty much the basis of my business. When that happens to you, you can come to me, and you can, if you can only afford to exercise 30,000, you just do 30,000, but I take care of the 400,000, at no financial risk to you.
I love it. Scott, that is so unique. Thank you for joining us on the show today. We had so many good conversations. It was really wonderful.
All right. It's my pleasure. All right. Thank you for having me.